mother whose autistic son was murdered by a convicted criminal who moved into his home. Fiona Lascaris says her son Christopher, who was 24, had been deemed capable of looking after himself because he had not been given what's called a mental capacity assessment. But Christopher was exploited and abused by his eventual killer before being stabbed through the heart. As Romilly Weeks reports, Fiona Lascaris is calling for a change in the law so that the concerns of parents can be heard. She says parents should have the right to ask for help if they fear their grown-up children are at risk.
Oh, he was just the sweetest little boy. He really was. He was unusual, perhaps a little eccentric, one might say, but very endearing. He was very much his own man. He did things his way. He was just lovely.
Fiona Lascaris' son Christopher was only 24 when he died. As a vulnerable autistic man who struggled to live independently, he'd been murdered by a criminal who'd moved uninvited into his flat.
It was basically cuckooing. You know, they were exploiting him, and he came back a few weeks later, gained access to his flat, and stabbed him through the heart. And Christopher was left just dying on the floor. So I rang up the police and asked for a welfare check, and that was when they went round and found him inside, and he'd been lying there for 2 weeks. Like he was just someone that no one cared about. But, you know, I just tried everything I could for years and years.
His mother is haunted by the fact that despite years of asking for help, Christopher didn't have the support he needed because he was presumed to have the capacity to make decisions for himself. She now wants the law to be changed so that the views of family members are taken into account when deciding whether someone needs a mental capacity assessment.
I mean, there were many failures in Christopher's case, public service failures, but so many of them came back to this issue of not assessing his capacity properly and taking his responses at face value that, you know, I'm fine. And Christopher wanted to please people around him. So if people were saying to him, oh, you don't need support, do you? He'd just say, yes, you know, I'm fine, I'm okay.
And you must have felt that you were shouting into a void and that you had been trying to tell the authorities, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen.
I was telling them. I mean, they were getting the letters, they were receiving them, they just weren't acting on them. And that's why I want the law changed. I want parents listened to so that no one else has to go through this. You know, years and years of trying to get help for your disabled child.
Fiona has the backing of this cross-party group of MPs, including the former Health Secretary, who agree the current system is failing autistic people like Christopher and other vulnerable adults.
It's very, very clear that, Fiona could have saved Christopher's life, and, she is now tortured by the fact that she wasn't able to do that. And I think the biggest thing that we could do as a legacy for Christopher is to make this very small change in the law, which effectively would give parents in Fiona's shoes the right to ask for a capacity exercise to be done. That's all it's doing, and then the professionals do their job.
One of those MPs, Chris Coughlin, has a very personal reason to want to help Fiona. By chance, he grew up and his own mother died in the same house where Fiona and Christopher later lived.
When a tragedy's happened in your own life, you sort of feel a sense of empathy. You're aware of that sort of feeling of searing injustice. So when Fiona told me what had happened to Christopher, that and the injustice of that made me really motivated to try and see what I could do.
Of course, this was before Chris became an MP. When you heard that he was wanting to become an MP, what did you say to him and what did you think?
We were getting nowhere until Chris came on the scene, and suddenly, because he raised it in his maiden speech, suddenly it's raised awareness of this enormous problem we've got.
The National Autistic Society says the issue could be affecting hundreds of people.
This is an issue that's really difficult to quantify because often you're looking for the thing that didn't happen or didn't happen right. But there is some research out there that suggests in around a quarter of deaths of people with a learning disability or who are autistic in the last few years that it's been misapplied. Now, how can that possibly be a functioning or working system? It's absolutely vital that the government looks into this.
Fiona, who fought so hard for her son during his life, is not giving up now that he's gone.